what so proudly we hailed, had the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's regular, the bomb spur stinging there, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Great. Can't wait to see who's next week. Thank you. All right, take a roll call.
Member Clancy?
Here.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Here.
Member Kamara? Member Mailman? Member McCullough? Member O'Connor?
Here.
All right. So next up is the consent agenda.
Vice Chair, we can't hear the roll call.
Member Clancy? No. Member Clancy?
Here.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Here.
Member Kamara? Member Mailman? Member
Here.
McCullough?
Here.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Here.
And Member Petty. Thank you.
All right. So the consent agenda, we will take it all together. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara? Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
All right. So we'll move on to public comment. Anyone wish to speak on anything for tonight? No? Anything online? No. All right. So we will move on to the report of the superintendent. Who is?
I'll go ahead and, good
Oh,
evening,
I'm sorry.
everybody. Oh, nope, through the chair. Good evening, all. I want to first thank Deputy Superintendent Brian Allen for sitting in for me as I'm attending a conference, a national conference this evening. As Ms. Arcelosa and Ms. Seal come to the front, I want to thank them again for pulling together part 2 of our Advancing the Success of Scholars with Disabilities. Just a reminder to the committee and to those viewing, last school committee meeting, we shared part 1 of this, where we really talked about who are our scholars who sit in our various settings for special education services. And a reminder to the committee that about 70% of our scholars who have some sort of disability are in our general education setting for a portion, if not the majority of their school day or all of their school day. It's referred to as inclusion. So a good percentage are learning alongside their general education peers, and we make those necessary accommodations as necessary so they could access the content. Also a reminder that the majority of the students who are identified with a disability are specific learning disabled, which means that they have different processing challenges. And so it's our responsibility to provide the content and assess it in a way that is not in their area of disability, or not in the area of processing challenges, but in other ways. 15% of, so that's 28% of our student population. 15% are students with some form of autism or autism spectrum. And then 12% in the communications area, so primarily speech and language, and another 12% that are emotional, identified for emotional needs. Those are the top 4 areas as a district. So as tonight, you will hear about where we are going, what our plan is to really enhance and accelerate outcomes for our scholars, keeping in mind that, again, the majority of our students sit in our general education settings. And so how are we working in those settings to support our educators, support our students, and support our families? So please be listening for ways by which our plan is to build capacity. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Academic Support Officer, Ms. Acelosa.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair, school committee members. Thank you for having us here tonight to share the desired state of the Special Education Division. I'll take a minute to set the stage, although Dr. Monarres did talk a little bit about it. Last time we were here to share our current state, and it was evident that we have a lot of work ahead of us. Tonight, we'll share our desired state, the strategies that we have identified, and the action steps for each. I'm confident that our plan to address the over-identification of our Latinx and multilingual learners, and our plan to improve educational outcomes while strengthening our scholars' social and emotional competencies will yield the intended results. We have the right people in place across the district, from the principals who will lead the work in their buildings to the teachers who will lead the work in their classrooms. We all own this work, and we will work collectively to achieve the desired results on behalf of our scholars. With that, I'll turn it over to Kay for the presentation.
All right. Good evening. School committee members, Dr. Monarres, and through the chair. Thank you again for this opportunity. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the staff in the Special Education Department who also leads this work. My 2 assistant directors of special education, Emily Lozano and Triada Frangu Apostolou. Also, who's also joining in the work is our special education department heads. We have 12, as well as our 24 evaluation team chairs and our 7 secretaries. Without all of them, this work would not be possible. It's also important for us to understand that it takes a village to educate and support students and all of our students. And I'd like to also acknowledge the school committee members, as well as our superintendent, as well as other leaders within the district, our teachers, also our department heads, our specialists, our support staff, secretaries, cafeteria workers, and transportation support staff. Because without them, we will not be able to provide access as well as meet the individual needs of our students. As you can see tonight through this presentation, we hope that we can share with you the essential components of what is the desired state for success for our scholars here in the Worcester Public Schools. So once again, we're going to look at the outcomes. And I'm just going to briefly go over some of the key components of what we shared with you at part 1 that we would like to continue to talk about for part 2. First of all, MTSS is not special education. MTSS is universal. It is an integrated framework that aligns learning through operational systems that will support all learners. It happens in our general education classrooms through various levels of supports, academic, social emotional competencies, as well as behavior. The second part of what we're going to talk about tonight is really looking at the key components. Am I going back to the first slide? Thank you. The key components of the IEP. You've heard me say before that the IEP is a roadmap, and it truly is, because through that is the toolkit for us to figure out how we're going to collectively, through the IEP process, accelerate learning for our scholars. The instructional methodologies of the IEP is really specially designed instruction, and that is what our specialists and our special education teachers are charged to do. We also must understand, and we'll talk further about accommodations and what that looks like in some of our classrooms and what types of services our students receive through accommodations. It's also important for me to conceptualize the desired state with you to also, throughout this presentation, it represents a shared responsibility of all stakeholders. This is not special education alone desired state. This must happen through ongoing listening sessions, systemic changes that include administrators, school leaders, teachers, specialists, support staff, and our caregivers. We will continuously reflect and monitor the outcomes of these action steps. We also recognize that throughout this process, we do understand that there's a sense of urgency for all of us stakeholders, and that we have shared ownership in order to make this a reality for our students in closing the achievement gap. So as I said before, multi-tiered systems of support begins within our classrooms, and it begins through targeted tiered interventions for all of our students. Our district also has a MTSS blueprint plan that provides assurances that all students, and it means all, that it aligns learning through operational systems that support all of our students. This also, once again, focuses on the academic, behavior, and social competencies. This school year, our superintendent recognized that there's a sense of urgency and a priority by establishing a multidisciplinary team, which I am a member of that team, along with my colleagues, other colleagues in the district, and other district leaders and educators, to develop an implementation plan for schools and staff. This work will definitely transform and impact learning outcomes for multilingual learners as well as students with disabilities across all levels throughout the districts. So let's break down the tiers. Once again, when we look at tiers, we're looking at targeted interventions. And when we look at tier 1, the bottom part of that pyramid, it's universal. Targeted supports are universal for all students. When we look at the second part of the pyramid, we're talking about small group supports that provide opportunities for students to develop learning and practice skills. And these interventions usually are 3 to 5. They're monitored closely for improvement and adjusted as needed to meet the needs of the students. When we look at tier 3, it's very intensive. It's really skill-based focused interventions. It's individual or small group. However, it's not yet special education. To advance outcomes, students who are in need of targeted interventions must receive these supports systemically across all tiers. They must also include data analysis and evidence-based strategies. In our general education classrooms, our desired state is working strategically to develop an implementation plan to address the advancement of all our learners. The IEP is individualized, is driven by our students, is developed by our team members. It goes beyond the tiers. When we think of the IEP, we want to make sure that our students' voice and their vision is part of that process. We want to make sure that our caregivers also have a voice in that process. It really identifies what the unique needs of our students are, the learning styles, as well as the methodologies of instructional practices. It also helps to promote independence for our students, as well as help with post-secondary outcomes to make sure that our students are independent as they transition from school to adult life. We talked before last time about the tiers and also about the referral process of evaluation. So I'm not going to go into detail, but when we look at multi-tier systems of support, we understand that it happens before we get to referral. So it's so important that we continuously evaluate and progress monitor our students. And when we look at the fifth part of that process, we talk about getting into determining eligibility. We must understand that all students may not be eligible for special education because we talked last time about those disability categories. And it's very important to understand that if you're not necessarily eligible for special education, it doesn't mean that you're not going to receive the supports that you need within our district, because there are tiered supports that are available for all students. And that's through our MTSS, and it's also through our district curriculum accommodation plan. So when we also have to keep in mind that when we look at the accommodations in the IEP, and Massachusetts does have straight criteria regarding referrals and also eligibility. So when we look at accommodations for our scholars, the IEP accommodations once again ensures access. It is a plan, it is a roadmap for our students. We also have to take into consideration targeted supports. And when we look at the general education curriculum as part A of that IEP, that's really how are our students going to access the content standards through targeted accommodations throughout his or her day that's really based on content subject areas. When we look at the Part B of the IEP in terms of other educational needs, we have students that are also visually impaired, we have students that are also deaf and hard of hearing, we also have students that are nonverbal. So we're talking about other types of supports. Some of our students may need Braille, some of our students may need technology tools, some of our students may need hearing aids to access learning. And some of our students may also need behavioral modifications, and that's also provided through Part B of the IEP. It's a continuous document of support, but most importantly, we start the IEP by looking at the current level of performance for our students, and through the evaluation process, the IEP team is responsible for developing targeted goals and objectives and benchmarks that are aligned to grade level standards. We do understand that some of our students may not be on grade level or may have deficits, but we primarily work strategically to make sure that we are developing meaningful goals and objectives for our students that are attainable for the school year of that IEP. IEPs are reviewed annually. Quarterly progress reports are done for our students annually as well to make sure that our students are making effective progress. Thank you. And this is really a continuum of the accommodation of content standards. So we start with the focus of the student. As a special education teacher and also as a general education teacher, you look at the method of instruction for those students, as well as what will be the measure for performance criteria to make sure that our students are attaining and access learning, and also what will be the timing and the schedule. Will K need 3 times 45 minutes for speech and language services? Our superintendent talked about language-based disability as one of our highest disability categories. If I do have a language-based disability, it may be in reading comprehension, it may be in written expression, then more likely the IEP team may identify that I might need more intensive services and more frequency in terms of services in order to meet my needs in that area of deficit. The desired state. Oftentimes, when we talk about the desired state, and when we were trying to really create a presentation that would really articulate what is the desired state for special education students and special education scholars here in the Worcester Public Schools. It is important that we understand that all of our students are unique, all of our students learn differently, and also all of our students may need services in different places throughout their day. Least restrictive environment could mean an inclusion setting, it could mean small group, but for some of our students, least restrictive setting may mean that a student might need a service in a substantially separate classroom. It has to be individualized. We want to promote least restrictive environment for our students, but we also want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And some of our students may need more intensive services. Some of our students may need more intensive services that are not provided within the district that may require some of our students to receive services outside the district. And when we talk about our desired state in terms of special education and least restrictive, ideally, we are committed to make sure that our students are placed in the general education classroom with supports, as well as much as we can promote with support and training and professional development, inclusive opportunities for our students. We want to make sure that we're also looking at the academic as well as the social emotional needs of our students, and especially the competencies that the students need in order for them to be successful. So as we talked about the strategies, and I think that when we talked about outcomes when we presented, we identified these areas as areas of strategies that we will be focusing on. So here are the 3 strategies that will lead our desired state. In order to provide a cohesive understanding of our desired state, the following action steps that I will review with you tonight will also result in us working collaboratively with school-based teams, as well as ongoing listening sessions with stakeholders within the district, as well as in the community, and also our caregivers as well. The Special Education Department is very committed in working strategically to advancing our students. So when we talk about the desired states and we talk about our strategies, we're going to start first by looking at closing the opportunity gaps through data-driven practices. We see that when we looked at that one indicator of MCAS, that truly did not tell the story of the performance of our students. But we do recognize that we must continuously progress monitor our students. We must make data-driven decisions and have practices to be accountable for the outcome for our students. We must analyze as well what services and supports our students need in order for them to have the necessary mental health support as well as the academic support that they need. Also, when we talk about looking at providing teachers with tools that need successful in meeting the diverse need of our learners, these are also another important strategy that we would like to identify as part of our desired state. We use various tools within the district, but also we need to really expand what we are currently doing to make sure that we're including tools that are evidence-based. We also need to make sure that we're providing the support for our, all teachers, not just our special education teachers, but our general education teachers. We are currently also using the Panorama surveys to drive our social-emotional learning and development, as well as looking at technology and as well as assistive technology. We have some students in our district that are nonverbal. So oftentimes we may also have to look at augmentative communication devices for our students. We're also using a program that we refer to as Goalbook. And that is a program that is used currently in the district by 335 users. We were hoping when we look at a desired state, we'd love to expand that to every single teacher, hear that, Brian? Every single teacher in the Worcester Public Schools. Currently, we have maximized over 21,000 resources from Goalbook. Goalbook is linked to our standards. It's linked to our Massachusetts learning standards. And what it does, it provides that leverage of rigor for our students with disabilities when writing those IEPs to make sure that the IEPs are written that are aligned to the standard-based, aligned to their grade level instruction. But it also provides scaffolding to help our students who need more intensive support, as well as the data monitoring tools to help us progress monitor our students as well. We also emphasize the need for us to focus on students with language disabilities. Our superintendent shared tonight that that is our primary one disability. What are we doing about that? So our desired state is really looking at what we need to do in the area of language-based approaches, as well as our programs, as well as our professional development. We've expanded and we will need to continue to expand some of our trainings to our general education teachers, especially teaching in terms of reading and literacy and strategies, because oftentimes if 70% of our students are in general education classrooms and our general education teachers need to reach and teach those students, then they need to be also learning those strategies as well. In terms of looking at our action steps, so one of our action steps in terms of looking at, oh, did you go past? Did you go back? What did you do to me? Go back one more. Is it go back one more? You went too fast? Okay. Engaging caregivers. That is so important for us right now because oftentimes we need to make sure that we have the parents' best interests. We are responsible for their child. That's such an important responsibility, and we want to make sure that we're also working in partnership with our parents. We want to make sure that our parents feel that they're part of the educational process, but we also want to make sure that our students understand and they have those self-advocacy skills to really be able to communicate how they learn and also to understand their disability in terms of what they need for the supports. So we will continue to look at developing strategies to build that capacity within the district. So now we're going to go to action steps. We talked a little bit about closing the opportunity gaps through data-driven decisions and practices. What does that look like? We know that the IEP process provides the progress monitoring because it's mandated. It's done quarterly. we're using progress monitoring tools. We know that there's formal assessments, there's student work, there's also the panorama surveys that we're also using, but the next step we really need to work on is creating dashboards for our teachers, deepening the understanding of analyzing data for our teachers to really make sure that they're using data to drive their instructional strategies. Looking at building capacity within our schools in terms of data teams. It's so important for us to make sure that when we're making decisions, that they're data-based decisions and that we're held accountable to use those decisions to really drive instruction and also success for our students. And Annie, would you mind talking a little bit more about the audit that will be also in place?
Yeah, so we're in the process of RFP for special education audit, and our two overarching goals are essentially, we seek to provide an exceptional continuum of services and special education programs and services, including our out-of-district placements, in an effort, again, to improve educational outcomes and strengthen our scholars' social-emotional competencies. The other overarching goal is that we seek to enhance, revamp, and develop systems, procedures, and processes and structures to ensure compliance and equity. So what does that look like? We're looking for recommendations for a robust continuum of services and special education programs and services. We're looking for the most effective and efficient programming for special education. We're looking for systems, procedures, and processes in order to ensure compliance and equity, the effectiveness of communication with our constituents, and how resources should be allocated to meet those overarching goals.
Thank you. Also, it's important to note that every single district in Massachusetts that has special education programs, that it is mandated for us to do our own external audit or what we call a program evaluation. So we look forward to getting resources and information as a result of that, especially looking at some of our programs that are making sure that they're meeting the needs of our students to make sure that we can really work strategically to do better. The next step is when we're talking about professional learning and we're looking at providing teacher with the tools in order for students to be successful. One of our action steps is really looking at what we're doing and working strategically with Office of Curriculum and Professional Learning, our Office of Social Emotional Learning, as well as some of our school-based teams in terms of developing strategic professional development for general education teachers, for our specialists, and also for special education teachers. We also understand that we have to be accountable in strengthening, as I said to you before, specially designed instruction. That is our instructional strategy under the umbrella of the IEP and special ed. So what are we doing as special education teachers to strengthen our delivery of those services? How are we guiding our practices to really reflect and look at data, to progress monitor our students, and hold ourselves accountable to make sure that our strategies and our methodologies are aligned to making sure that our students are working on grade level? Also, looking at what resources are available to support in terms of educational efficacy, and we talked a little bit also about tiered interventions. Although I did say to you that multi-tiered systems of support is a general education initiative, we do understand that some of our students with disabilities could also benefit from some of those tiered interventions and partner within our schools to look at that. We also need to be realistic and understand that we need to also look at the mitigating factors that have over-identified our students with disabilities in this district, especially when we're looking at our Hispanic students with the high percentage of students that have a language disability and also communication disabilities. Are we taking into consideration any exclusionary factors? That too must also be taken into consideration. I'm just trying to see the last one. And also we'll work closely with human resources to look at what we're doing in the area of retaining and recruitment. I've been doing and working in this field for over 30 years, and I must say, this is the most challenging year for us as educators. Finding special education teachers, speech and language pathologists, visually impaired teachers, we are in a national crisis. So we have to figure out what we're going to do to not only just ensure fate for our students, but for the teachers that we have. What supports and structures do we need to put in place to retain them? And also, what must we do as a district to recruit teachers that are highly qualified? We have an internal pipeline, but can we look at also maximizing some of our future graduates and steer them into the field of education? We look at all the different options, how we can really build that capacity across the district as well, and work closely with our schools. Once again, as we look at the action steps in terms of the caregivers, we do know that there is a new initiative in terms of the family engagement framework, And Annie's working closely in taking lead in terms of overseeing and coordinating the development of that. And we in special education will also be working strategically as part of that network and part of the framework, because it's all about our families, it's all about our kids. We also really need to make sure that our parents are part of the learning process. We are mandated each year to provide training to our parents. We work on putting together and we do a needs assessment to identify through our SPED PAC what trainings our parents need. But that's not a SPED PAC. A SPED PAC must be led by our parents. We have to strategically try to figure out how to get our parents out there, how to get them where they feel welcome in our schools, a sense of belonging, to really lead the charge and be a part of a SPED PAC and a voice for other families here in the district. We've also provided targeted trainings for some of our students, especially our students that have autism, where we have parent trainings, and also for some of our students who have an emotional disability in terms of behavioral management or also social situations for some of our families, and also in terms of resources that are available in the community. We're currently, as I said to you before, one of our other action steps is partnering with DESE. We have one of our elementary schools right now that are partnering and implementing the new IEP. And we hope to continue in that work, and hopefully next year we'll have more information, because we know that the goal that DESE is planning on launching the new IEP next school year. So that's going to also be a work in progress.
Thank you, Kay. Clearly, we have some work to do, and as I often say, we will roll up our sleeves and get to work. Our special education scholars belong to us all. We all have our fingerprints in the work that we facilitate, and again, I'm confident that we will work together to close opportunity gaps by ensuring that all our scholars have access and equity to a high-quality education.
So I'd like to cordially invite all of you and to our listeners. This will be our 10th celebration of success, and as well to our school committee members. It is an unbelievable evening of celebration, because it's an opportunity for us to really celebrate the achievements of our students. We have celebrated students who have been selectively mute, who have not spoken, and have spoken. We've celebrated students that have difficulty with mobility and they're walking. We've celebrated students with disabilities who have graduated and are now going on to college. Worcester State, some of our local colleges, Quinsigamond Community College. It's a celebration, and students are nominated by their school, by their teacher. Staff are also nominated based on the difference that they have made, and also for the contributions that they have made throughout the year in supporting our students, and also the difference that they have made as well. So we acknowledge our staff's commitment and their dedication. So it's a night of celebration for all. So we really would invite you to join us on May 31st, which is a Tuesday. We extend our appreciation again to Worcester Tech High School, because they have held our hands in this celebration for the past 10 years. We started when I started, and I really think that it's a remarkable opportunity, because at the end of the day, what do we want for our kids? We want our kids to graduate. We want our kids to have a successful future, to be independent. And oftentimes, it's such a wonderful evening to see how our students are so dressed up, they're excited, they're not getting a diploma, but they're getting a certificate, which recognizes their hard work and their dedication. So I really ask if you would make the time in your schedule to join us that night in celebrating our students. Also in closing, I'd like to acknowledge that this is Black History Month, and by ending this presentation, I'd like to share with you the following quotes. "The things that make us different, those are our superpowers." Lena Waithe. "Won't it be wonderful when Black history and Native American history and Jewish history and all of U.S. history is taught from one book, just U.S. history?" Maya Angelou. "Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations." Dr. Mae Jemison. "Where there is no vision, there is no hope." George Washington Carver. "Diversity is not about how we differ. Diversity is about embracing one another's uniqueness." Ola Joseph. Again, I thank you for this opportunity. I welcome the opportunity for school committee members to partner with us, visit some of our special education classrooms, and really work strategically with us. I'm also very pleased to be part and proud to be part of a wonderful school district who puts the needs of the students first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone? Approve?
I think Tracy.
I don't think Sue, Sue does have. Go ahead, Member Mailman.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and a couple of things. I think I caught a couple of your comments, Dr. Seal, about maybe money, and it sounded like it was for some guidance for the teachers. I wanted to understand what it was that you were asking, and I actually have a couple of questions. That's one of them.
Are you referring to professional learning?
It was you asked Brian Allen for.
Oh. Oh.
I caught it, Kay.
Oh,
I
you caught it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. No, we currently have launched a program that I had referred to, and right now we are not. It's not throughout the district. We are just having over 300 teachers using that program, and it's really a great tool to help us with IEPs, with progress monitoring, also data collection, and also data analysis. So I was teasing our chief financial officer in that area.
And what was the name of that program?
Is it okay for me to say it publicly? It's Goalbook. It's a toolkit.
Thank you.
And it's also linked to the Massachusetts standards.
Thank you. Thank you. Just so we can help chat with him about that as well. The second question I have about this presentation is really about timelines. And I'm guessing that all of these things are going to proceed at once somehow, but I'm curious about the audit timeline, and if there's any priorities along the line. So I wonder if at some point we could maybe have an update about, where our effort's going to be. There's a ton of work, as you pointed out, and I'm just curious, like what we're attacking first or in what order.
Thank you for that question. So it is an extensive audit, and it will take several months actually into next year. And we will have timelines throughout the year where they will give us initial reports on certain items. So we will get some feedback in certain periods of the year, June, September, and then finally the final report due in November.
My understanding also there will be focus groups as well.
Okay.
Yes, of course. So the organization that will be chosen will hold focus groups for students, families, and staff as well.
Okay. And then I just, internally, obviously the work will continue as the audit goes on. So I'm curious if you can just give us a sense of our priorities, because there's a lot of work here. So maybe that could be provided to us as we go down the road.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All set? Hold on. Member Kamara?
Thank you. Thank you to the chair, and thank you for the presentation, Kate. I'm really impressed that we have this presentation, and more so impressed that on the conversation of reaching and including families, engaging families in training. And I think it's so important in the fact that of the data that shows students with disabilities, that also shows students with disabilities who come from families who are first language speakers, or not first language speakers, but not English language is not their first language. And from over the years of just hearing families who love their kids and mean so well and want to be a support system to their children. And in some instances, as we've been on a trajectory of growth in this area or in this area of work, but in the past, I think there was, for at least for some of the families that I've spoken to or have spoken to me about this topic, where there had been some confusion in terms of services. So if you remember the last time I was asking about services in which parts of the district where we have certain services for students with special needs, and how does that look like? and to kind of connect that to this, to this content here about really educating families on our programs, on our practices and procedurals, but then also giving them the ability to take on that work, right, with the SPED Pack. I think that's incredible. And I want to commend that. And I also want to appreciate the fact that that's also a focus of this entire plan going forward, to really invest in the technical know-how of our families in the district. And so I'm not too sure like how much in depth your team has gone into doing this work with a framework and engaging family and training families, but I would like to hear a little bit about it, if there's any progress or like plan, or how does that really look like in terms of doing moving from framework to the practical know-hows and trainings and stuff.
I think through our SPED Pack and throughout the years, what we've done is we've done a needs assessment to identify what professional development training our parents are interested in having each year. My point is that we need to go above and beyond just providing professional development training. We need to have our parents feel as if they have a voice and there's ownership. The special education pack is not really driven by the special education department. We support the special education pack, but it really should be led by our parents. So some of the work that we need to do is to really figure out how we can push out more, engage our parents more, make them feel as if they're comfortable in taking a leadership role, in supporting other parents, networking with other parents. We do have an officer who leads that work now, which is another parent, and she does have reach out to our parents, and she'll have focus groups with parents, and they talk about similar topics and certain things that are of interest to them. But I think part of what we've done for our parents is really helping them to understand, what does it mean if your child has a disability? What are some strategies and supports that you can work with your child at home if your child is dyslexic, if your child has a language-based disability, and or if your child has behavioral needs. We just recently did a training on language-based disabilities. We've also done some trainings for parents for early childhood, because you're now understanding that your child may have a developmental delay. So we've really tried to target trainings to kind of deepen parents' understanding of what does that mean, what does it look like, what kind of supports will I need to advocate for my child. And also we want to also make sure that we annually provide trainings to parents around their basic rights. So those are some of the things that we've done, and as well as also making sure that we provide opportunities where we're celebrating our students as well.
Thank you. And I also want to just, I think I only mentioned Kate there, but also Annie or Ann for the presentation that you guys both just provided to us. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Member O'Connell Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really, I guess, three things. First of all, can you just help me understand slide 9 a little bit better? The accommodations to access content standards. Am I right in interpreting that as effectively this is the kind of things that can be altered within an IEP in the way of accommodations?
So think about that as the stepping stone. And we didn't talk much about modifications, but when we talk about accommodations for IEPs for students are really aligned to the standards, to the grade level standards. When we talk about modifications changes to content. So for example, MCAS is a state assessment, right? And a modification for a state assessment would be the MCAS alt. So when we look at those stepping stones, we talk about looking at through the lens of accommodations through the student response in terms of how does the student respond, what are the needs for the student through his or her IEP in order for them to access. When we look at the method of instruction, What does that student need in order to be instructed, in order that student has a math disability? What kind of strategies, what kind of supports are needed? When we talk about performance criteria, how are we going to measure that? What is it going to look like? What's going to be the progress monitoring tools that we're going to use? And the timing and the schedule is, when am I going to get those services? What are those services going to look like? What's going to be the increment and the frequency of those services, as well as the setting? So it's kind of looking at the stepping stone of the process as to how our students really make sure that they're having access to content standards as part of our accommodations.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then in terms of the slides on strategy, the first one that talks about closing opportunity gaps through data-driven practices, I'm a little concerned, I guess, only because the list, the bulleted list there, they're not practices. They're all different ways that we're measuring, for the most part. And I mean, granted, I got my educator license about the same time as education reform, so I've had people talking about weighing pigs for all of my education career. So I'm always a little sensitive to we weigh and we weigh and we weigh, or we measure and we measure and we measure. And I just want to make sure that we're then sort of doing something with it. And that just struck me. The second thing is that in terms of the next slide, in terms of providing teachers with the tools they need to be successful, how is it that we increase educator efficacy? And how is it that we actually move to mitigate over-identification? Is that a training? Is that we screen differently? Is that what is it that, and maybe we don't know yet, but what is it, how is it that you actually make the alteration there? Through the chair.
Those are two loaded questions, so let me see if I can unpack that. So when we look at educational efficacy, it's really looking at it through the lens of all learners,
Yes.
right? And we're looking at it through the lens of the fact that I'm a special education teacher, Annie is a multilingual learning teacher. We both come to the table with different skill sets and certain strategies. So how can we really create a culture of acceptance in looking at the skill sets of our teachers to really provide exemplary services for our students based on educational efficacy, right? So it's not just a silo, right? We're really looking at best practices. The second part of your question is really, can you please repeat that?
In terms of how do we actually mitigate over-identification? I mean, that was sort of the crux of even sort of one of the points.
So I think so that goes back to when I say that we need to really look at strengthening our work around multi-tier systems of support.
Okay.
And that's really why our superintendent has really led the charge by saying, you know what, we need a district implementation plan. Mm-hmm. We have the framework, we have the blueprints, now what? Mm-hmm. So we will also need to make sure that it's in the classrooms, because those tiered interventions must really happen within the classrooms with the teachers. Our general education teachers have the heaviest lift, because they have students that have a vast level of needs. And they also have students that are multilingual learners, right? Mm-hmm. So what targeted interventions and supports can we look at within a district and professional development that we can provide to really support our general education teachers? When we start doing that, we start looking at it before we refer a student to special education, then those are the mitigating factors that we'll look at, really shifting our data to really look at meeting the needs of those students in general education, not after they've been identified for special education.
Got it. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, that we effectively then aren't shunting students into that path. They're actually being, okay, thank you. And then the only other thing is I really appreciate the focus that you're putting on SpedPAC, because in terms of that partnership with families, I think that is something that we have been really weak on, and making sure that that is, as you say, really a parent-driven organization as it's supposed to be legally. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we will accept and file. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty?
Yes. That was it. I'll get used to it. Okay, we're on the Standing Committee on Governance and Employee Issues, met virtually and in person on Tuesday, January 21st. Member Clancy?
Thank you. Yes, so the governance and through the chair, the governance and employee issues met January 31st at 5:30. We took up a couple of items. The first one was GB 2-318, which was to consider approval of a request of donated sick time for a paraprofessional at Chandler Magnet and a staff member at Burncoat. On a roll call of 3-0, that request was approved. The next one that we brought up was GB 2-176, which I had brought back to the committee to request the administration to review and update our attendance policy. And at this point, I am going to ask that the administration did bring a new proposed policy to us. And Dr. Morse had spoken on updating the policy, and she stated with the intent was to have a consistency across the district. She also highlighted that a designated caregiver would provide notification. So the actual wording in the policy, what I'm looking to do now is the current policy that we have in terms of illness or medical documentation absences with written or other phone calls / emails, communication verification from the parent, caregiver, or their student's treating physician. That at this point, that's the only change that I would like to make, and I will make a motion that we recommit the attendance policy back to the governance committee for further work. And on the next item, we started to, which was ROS 0-9, which was the report from the Rennie Center, and ROS 1-7, which was another report from the Rennie Center on the strategic plan. We also took that in conjunction with ROS 3-1, which was from an administration, and it was the path to the refined strategic plan and to approve the strategic plan and the goals. The superintendent did present to us her goals for this school year. There was a district goal, a student goal, and a professional goal. And at that meeting, we discussed a little bit of the goals, and we approved those goals on a 3-0 motion to file and to move the goals to full committee for approval. We also discussed, we started the work on the strategic plan, and the administration gave us a report and some updates on some data points. I also requested that the administration see if we can get the full reports from the Rennie Center that were back in April of 2021. The strategic plan, we're actually going to be holding it in governance because it's going to be a continuous process moving forward. And on a roll call of 3-0, the motion was approved. And then we adjourned the meeting, and we did a roll call in 3-0, a roll call of 3-0 to approve the adjournment of the meeting.
So we'll take a motion. You like a question?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask, I think through the chair, probably to Dr. Menares, this is really a process question because we are we're doing like a 6-month, not even 6-month kind of goal setting and evaluation. Is there any intent, usually we would have a mid-cycle review. I'm not trying to make more work for anyone, but I am wondering how your intent is to update us about progress between now and June, or is it something where you think that you probably will give us kind of a grand overview once we get to the end of the school year?
Madam Superintendent?
Through the chair, given our time frame, I think what I'd like to recommend is as reported the superintendents align to these short-term goals, that I can bring that, kind of highlight that when upon the introduction of the report of the superintendent. So that could be, I want that to be one place because I want you all to see that everything we do is in alignment. So that's one that I would recommend. If the committee would like to have a report of the superintendent, maybe, let's see, these are in June, maybe the second committee meeting in April, if our calendar allows for it. I know we'll be starting into budget season soon. I can do that as well. But I was really thinking, just because of the short timeline, that I would just connect it into the report of the superintendent ongoing each time as we move forward.
No, thank you. I honestly, that would, I would consider that a best practice anyway. So I don't think that, I mean, at least from my perspective, I don't think we need to take a separate report to do that. I think the sort of like, please remember that this is actually aligned to this goal is exactly the kind of reminders that we should be doing. Thank you. That's all I had.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So motions to, on the roll call, motion to accept the report and also return the attendance policy back to committee. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty?
Yes. Next is,
Mr. Chair, just a point of personal privilege, if I may. And I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to do this earlier, although we had the vice chair juggling a lot. My colleagues may or may not be aware that that Joe Manfredo, who was a longtime educator and former principal, has passed away this week. Also, of course, brother of one of the former members of the Worcester School Committee, John Manfredo. If it's possible, Mr. Chair, I realize we're kind of in the middle of business, but if we could potentially take a moment of silence when it's appropriate. Thank you.
okay, we have grants and other finance items. We have 3 items. We can take them collectively, unless anybody wants to pull anything out. Consider approval of prior year payment in the amount of $426.20 to Amazon for items that were on back order. To consider the approval of prior year payment of $549.90 for a 42-week cafeteria helper. Consider approval of prior year payment amount of $11,611.87. The services rendered by Springfield Education Center, Inc. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty?
Yes. General business. Consider a letter to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees with a request to work with the local school committees to increase funding for the MSBA and to work with communities to get MSBA Accelerated Repair Program that was delayed this year restarted. We put on the record that, for the record, Ms. Novick has left the room, and I'll just do it from the chair, is that okay? And just say, listen, this is a very important issue. I know, remember Novick brought it up in another context about a month ago, and we depend on the MSBA for our buildings, and we have several, well, more than 1 or 2 buildings that need to be done, but with Doherty and South High School and Nelson Place being done, we've probably invested a little bit under $600 million in those 3 schools, and Burncoat needs to be done, high school, East Middle, and I'm sure if Brian Allen had his way to get every school building done. So I think this is important that we get a statewide effort, and we get a coalition going, and to make sure that the MSBA gets more funding than what's getting now. Okay. We do have to do a roll call, right?
Can I?
Who's that? Member Kamara?
Yes. To the chair. And so this is, I would like to understand if it's possible for us to make a motion to get updates on this. I don't know if that's
Sure.
feasible to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the past experience, it's been a collective effort. In other avenues we've taken this, whether it be school funding, and it's the collective effort of the school committee. So, yep.
Okay.
So to amend this to include updates when necessary to the Worcester School Committee.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick? Mayor Petty?
Yes. Okay, we have Member Colonel Novick regarding request that the Cable Advisory Committee divide equally the proceeds of the cable access fee among district, government, and local access channels. Member Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these are the funds that are received each year through the cable subscriptions. And the first issue, of course, is that plenty of people are cutting the cord, which means that this is a dwindling amount of money that's actually going forward, which then makes it that much more of a struggle for our own television folks to actually provide services, which, as I think most of us are aware, have actually been increasing from year to year. Not only do they, of course, do all of our meetings, but if any of you are checking our YouTube channel, concerts, performances, all kinds of other things. I do also want to put this in the context, for example, of the item that has come through from Member McCullough. We've actually got plenty of interest in terms of us expanding even further in terms of being able to stream things like sports. However, that amount of money is getting smaller. Costs, of course, are only going up. We're using equipment that needs updating. And the other thing that I was not aware of until I actually started to look into this, that the public channel is actually a registered nonprofit, but the city and, of course, the schools channels are not. So there is fundraising that takes place from the public channel. That is not a resource that's actually available to the other two channels. So really, this is simply asking for that funding to be divided equitably. I would be asking my colleagues to take a position on this that then would actually go to the Cable Advisory Committee as the position of the Worcester School Committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? So send that to the Cable Advisory Committee, along with, I guess, it would be the
Joe?
Member
Mayor?
Kamara?
I'm sorry.
I mean, Member Mailman?
Thank you. I was able to attend, I think we were all invited to a meeting of Spectrum put on, was it Spectrum? About, yes, because it was about the upcoming cable renewal that will happen or not happen. And I don't know if this is a technicality through the chair to Member Novick, but it's actually not the advisory committee. The recommendation for how the money is split comes from the city manager. So I don't know if we want to say that. The one other thing that I learned at that meeting that was pretty important was that we're doing kind of a lousy job in Massachusetts, putting all those costs for infrastructure through the cable providers. And there was a bill that was passed in New York, and possibly MASC is aware of this, where these costs are now shared by all the providers. So, and if there was more, which would mean we would be getting revenue from a bunch of different streams, which would mean we might rethink, what is done by each of these entities. So, in general, I'm in support of this, but I think there's a lot that I just learned in attending that other meeting. And I think, and one of the things is that it actually is a city manager recommendation. So.
Along with the city council. Yeah.
In the council, okay.
Yeah.
So can I just ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Member Kamara.
So then to Member Millman's comment, so then how can we be involved with this? Do we also make a motion and write a letter in support of?
Well, I think
Yep.
not to put words in everybody's mouth, but I think the intent of this is to make sure the school side gets its fair share. And,
right.
So I think it's allowable motion on that, and so is that what you were asking? Well,
Right. But yes.
okay. I mean, this is going to be thought out. I mean, whether we vote this or not, it's going to be a long process once we understand the funding, and because unfortunately, as internet services rise and people don't use cable as much, they get their own, whether it be Netflix or HBO, YouTube, etc. This business is not going to be as lucrative as it was for the city of Worcester, so from the cable company. So I think they get the work cut out for them. I know this is in the committee for the city council being discussed at public transportation services. So we can send that also to the committee if you like, and to the manager. Okay. Because it'd be nice to get a report back on how this is distributed now, what it's done, so nobody's, because I know for example, local access station has a number of employees that they use too. You don't want that to be impacted either at the same time, so. So maybe we send it to all three, and so we can discuss it. Yep.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can you just clarify, send it to all three of who?
Of the subcommittee of the city council, along with the city manager and the cable advisory committee.
Okay, I think, obviously I would need to defer to you as chair, but I think that it procedurally is problematic for us to send something to the city manager. I don't think that we actually have the authority to do that.
Oh, you can send it to the council, and it goes to the city manager.
We can send it to you, and you can send it to council.
Yeah, okay.
The last thing I'd want to do is make a motion that was out of order. We did actually receive, I will say, I appreciate the administration. This came actually from one of the weekly updates that we received from administration, which actually did have the division within it in terms of what each is. I don't want to put administration on the spot, but perhaps they may have been able to recapitulate that for us if you were interested
50/20.
through the chair to administration.
We'll get that the next meeting.
Sure. You wanted to, so you were asking that this go to finance and operations meeting jointly with education?
Yeah, we can do that. That
Okay.
may be a better spot, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
Yes. Okay. Next is Member McCullough to review and/or develop policies regarding public use of school playgrounds, adjoining playgrounds, and parks during school days and recess
As it
times.
reads.
Okay, roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
Yes. Member McCullough requests that the administration collaborate with the Worcester Public Library and our one city, one library schools to ensure that the parameters set regarding the use of library space is available to school-based needs. Member McCullough?
Thank you. And through the chair, we certainly have a wonderful relationship with the Worcester Public Library and our One City, One Library program. I just ask that administration can look into the policies and have a conversation with our principals to ensure that our spaces are available as needed and that the ongoing partnership is successful with the One City, One Library.
Okay. Roll call.
sorry, can I?
Member Kamara?
Yeah. I want to appreciate my colleague on this item. I also want to ask if we can just kind of define school-based needs. Because I was under the impression that those One City, One Libraries in our public schools were accessible to the public. So I want to understand, this is a wonderful item, but I also want to understand kind of what are we defining when we talk about school-based needs?
Through the chair, this is specifically referencing during the school day. So that's the policy that would be set with the district. So it's not in any way crossing over to when the schools are closed and it's being used specifically by the library. This is a specific policy to our use agreement with One City, One Library. Thank you.
All set? Okay, so we'll send that to the administration. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connell-Novick?
Yes.
And Member Petty.
Yes. The next item is to consider approval of the wage increase for certified nursing assistant, licensed practical nurse positions, and/or under the clinical care program. Roll call. Member Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two questions. I assume what we're approving here is actually a dollar amount per hour through the chair to administration. Just isn't.
Mr. Allen? Yes,
It
it's
isn't specified, but I assume that's what it is.
Yep. Oh, we're getting the troops.
Through the chair to Member Novick. Yes, that is correct, per hour, and we are requesting the 25. I don't realize, it says 25 to 30, I believe?
I think it says change proposal to 30 to 35 for CNA.
Oh, for the LPN. So for the CNA is 25 to 30. So it's 25 effective February 1st, and then 35 effective February 1st for the LPNs.
Okay. That's not. it says change proposal to 40 to 45 for LPNs. Sorry, I just want to make sure I know what we're passing.
So through the chair, we want to first thank the committee for bringing it to our attention. We gave us an opportunity to really look at what other districts around us were paying, the LPNs and CNAs. So it really gave us an opportunity to really look at the work that our CNAs and LPNs are doing. And we recognized that we needed to make sure we were competitive in order to maintain our staff. So it is my understanding that, again, the school committee brought this forth, and I want to especially thank, I understand, Member Kamara for really pushing this through. The numbers here are inaccurate. What we are asking, this has a lot of things combined, but what we're asking is to begin on February 1st to have all of our CNAs increase to $25 an hour and our LPNs to the 35, I'm sorry, and that we are going to recommend that we increase this for next year from the 25 to 30 for our CNAs and the 35 to 40 for our LPNs.
Okay. So I think the first thing we should do is make sure that we're all clear on what we're passing then. So let's make sure our language is clear. And then at the bottom, it says, I would also like to propose a first come, first served tuition reimbursement for the staff, similar to the paraprofessionals. Is there a dollar amount attached to that? Or is that not happening, or through the chair?
Mr. Allen?
Through the chair, that's something we're going to revisit later down the road. So that's not in front of the school committee at this point.
Okay, so the only thing that's in front of the school committee right now is a motion for us to increase the dollar amount per hour of CNAs to $25 an hour and of LPNs to $35 an hour effective February 1st. Is that correct? Okay, then that would be the motion, I think, then, Mr. Chair, if I have that correct.
Okay. All set, everyone? Member Kamara?
Thank you to the chair. I just want to say thank you for this, for bringing this wage here to our attention, because I know how important it is, the work of CNAs and LPNs in our district, especially as we talked about the topic of students with disabilities, so supporting that, and even with our school-based health and other roles, of course, that we do play in our district that I'm not naming right now based on interest of time. But I want to thank the administration for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take a roll call on that. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
Okay, this brings us to the end of the meeting.
Mr. Chair, would
What?
a motion
This
for
motion, yeah.
reconsideration
which
be in
one?
order on that? Is
On
there
which
a
one?
timely,
On the
On-
ones we just passed?
on the salary? Is there a time consideration here? No? Okay.
No, we're all set. I get right here. Okay. Okay. I know you are. You know I'll screw it up. Okay. So, before we close and wish everybody a happy school vacation week, and wish everybody spend some time with your family over the next week, and just have a little business here to do. Pursuant to action taken in executive session, was voted to terminate the contract of employment of the coordinator of nurses upon its expiration on June 30th, 2023. To authorize the chair to send the required notice of such intent to terminate the contract upon its expiration of the coordinator of nurses. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connor Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
Yes, motion to adjourn. Roll call.
Member Clancy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Member Kamara?
Yes.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
Member McCullough?
Yes.
Member O'Connor Novick?
Yes.
And Mayor Petty.
Yes.